Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Video Game Cemetery, home to the forgotten, lost and dead retro video games of the past. And of course home to horror titles. And today we'll be taking a look at my top 12 horror video games of all time. This would have been a top 10, but I just couldn't squeeze them all in. Do not expect to see the expected tonight, ladies and gentlemen, because my taste is very different to the masses. And I believe that these 12, personally, are the top scariest horror games of all time. On a side note, anybody that knows me knows I'm absolutely petrified of robots. So I'm not including any games that include robots or AI or cyborgs or anything like that. This is a top 12 horror games that were meant to be horror games, not just horrifying because of my robophobia. With that said, let us enter the top 12 horror video games of all time. Coming in at number 12, Forbidden Siren on the PS2.
Forbidden Siren has unfortunately fallen into the realm of the lost. The last game to get a release was Blood Curse on the PS3, which was great, but unfortunately there has been no new entries since. It did get a re-release on the PS4 as a digital download, not physical sadly, but there has been no mentions of any new ones since Blood Curse, which is a great shame considering how bloody amazing this series is. This is true survival horror, but unlike most survival horror games in which you're limited with ammo and forced to reserve healing items, etc., this one leaves you pretty much defenseless for the most part. Your best chance at surviving this horrible situation is using stealth and your ability to sightjack, which allows you to psychically see through the eyes of other people and also the monsters. Your main enemy in this game are the Shibito, which translates to corpse people. They are the demonically possessed corpses of dead humans, but retain intelligence. They go about their everyday lives until they spot you, and when they do, you're as good as dead. For those that don't know, Forbidden Siren was created by some of the original team that worked on Silent Hill, Team Silent, which probably explains why it's so bloody disturbing.
Coming in at number 11, we have Resident Evil 7 on the PS4.
We're gonna be a family now that you're here.
I felt I had to include at least one Resident Evil game on this list, and if we're going for horror, Resident Evil 7 is quite possibly one of the best horror games of all time, not just in the Resident Evil series. Resident Evil games have been in a serious decline for a very long time, since the release of the ridiculously action-packed and not scary at all, Resident Evil 5, which had a heavy emphasis on cooperative play and playing as a steroid-freak incarnation of Chris Redfield. But Resident Evil 7 fixed all of that mess. Resident Evil 7 doesn't put you in the shoes of a well-armed, well-trained Marine or a cop or any Special Forces members. It puts you in the shoes of Ethan, a normal, defenseless man in search of his missing, presumed dead wife, Mia Winters, who sent him a video message 3 years after her disappearance, telling him to stay away. Away from what? Well, supposedly a creepy old cabin down south. Upon hearing that she might still be alive, of course, Ethan goes to the very place he was told to stay away from, and after he makes his way into the cabin, he finds Mia locked up in the cellar. After she sees him, she tries to tell him that they need to escape, and as you do your best to get you both to safety, well, look, I'm not even going to tell you what happens. Just have a look for yourself.
her. I can feel her clawing her way back inside of me. Get out! Leave me alone! I've been bad. I deserve this.
So Mia is possessed in some serious Evil Dead 1's Linda style with a bit of Mia from Evil Dead 4 for good measure. Do I even need to explain why this game is on this list beyond this point? It's a fucking masterpiece, and the fact you're a defenseless man in first person mode, putting you into the game personally instead of some overpowered soldier, means it feels like you are living a true nightmare. And it just gets better from here. Well deserving of this list. You outdid yourselves here, Capcom. Now please fix Claire's face in Resident Evil 2's remake.
Coming in at number 10, we have Evil Dead: Hail to the King on the PS1. Groovy.
We decided to go back to the cabin, back to where it all started. She said it would be good to face my fears. Big mistake.
This game got a whole lot of hate from critics and Resident Evil fans when it came out. It was considered a Resident Evil clone because of its fixed camera angles, pre-rendered backgrounds and limited inventory space, but hey, Alone in the Dark created that style, not Resident Evil, and all survival horror games of the time did this, so what's your fucking problem? This game would have been a lot higher on this list, but I must admit, I had trouble ordering these. So just trust me when I say, this game is fucking scary at times. Despite Bruce Campbell talking smack constantly, this game used to give me chills. Just walking around the infamous cabin of the very movies that gave me night terrors as a child, and fighting off these incorporeal spirits that possessed all of Ash's friends in the movies, was a real chiller for me, and that doesn't even include the amazing first boss, which, in my view, is the best one. I won't spoil it for you, but I'll tell you now, she lives in the attic of the redneck hut to the right of the cabin. Just go out and play it. And if you're having trouble with the respawning demons, here's some advice. When you first decide to leave the cabin, do not go out the front door. Go out the back. The work shed has a safe crate and item storage box there. Then head to that redneck hut. And remember, the Evil Dead was always about constant, persistent demons that kept coming back. So, respawning enemies aren't that big of a deal here.
Coming in at number 9, we have the original first Silent Hill.
Silent Hill 1. Why Silent Hill 1? Because it's fucking Silent Hill 1, that's why. Fuck off. The best of the entire series. This game has you shitting yourself with its psychological style, and the atmosphere, creatures, and Samael, the demon at the end, are all as creepy as fuck. It pisses me off that in the HD collection on the PS3 that this one was not included. Who cares about the graphics not being as updated as the PS2 titles? It should still have been on there. Go and play this one if you haven't already. It really is top of the range.
Coming in at number 8, we have the obscure Marson Gothic on the PS1.
Marson Gothic is pretty much what you'd probably call Resident Evil in space with a Doom aesthetic. This wouldn't be a bad description, to be honest, but this game does deserve credit on its own. It's got a very lonely atmosphere, which is funny, because the slogan of this game was something like, "Stay alone, stay alive." This game has 3 playable characters, and they are all playable at once, but you must never ever let them meet up, or they will all die, by merging together into a monster of some kind. This team of people arrive on Mars to find everybody dead, and some of the dead being supernaturally controlled, either possessed or zombified. It's a really unique take on survival horror, and definitely a favourite of mine.
At number 7, we have Cold Fear on the PS2.
These old Russian whalers all stink to high heaven. What's that? Open fire! Open fire! Holy shit! Ah!
Now this game is sadly one of the few victims of Resident Evil 4's hype. I know I'm mentioning Resident Evil a lot here, but that's because its popularity often overshadowed games of a similar nature that either fell under the radar completely or was just simply pushed aside to make room for it. Cold Fear is definitely one of those titles. It was initially to be a sequel to Alone in the Dark 4, The New Nightmare, being the next game made by Darkworks Company. Unfortunately, all of its brilliance was completely ignored in favour of Resident Evil 4, as they had a very similar release date. Cold Fear takes a lot of what made Resident Evil successful and blends it with The Thing, Alone in the Dark and more. It is set entirely on a ship caught in a sea storm, and its mechanics and physics are very impressive. This is a must play for anyone who loves survival horror and somehow missed out on this one.
At least I found the code.
In at number 6 we have Doom on the PS1.
Doom is absolutely terrifying. I know what you're thinking. Doom? Scary? It's all about feeling like a badass and kicking demons back to hell. Doom guy ain't scared of nothing. Yes, but I'm referring to Doom on the PlayStation, remember. This game takes what was once a heavy metal, badass, ass-kicking and makes it a horrific, heart-racing nightmare. Gone are the MIDI rock music files, and instead we now have dark ambient horror music, slow and droning, and the lighting has been turned low with darker shades of blues and reds and greens, and this game feels like Doom, like you are actually doomed and lost in hell. Nobody is there with you. Nobody will save you. It's up to you. Just you, alone and scared and doomed.
In at number 5 we have Alone in the Dark 4, The New Nightmare on the PS1.
Alone in the Dark 4, The New Nightmare was also released on the PS2 and Dreamcast, but this is a PlayStation video, damn it. It was released by Darkworks, and all I can say is they hit the nail right on the head with this one. It's one of the creepiest PS1 survival horror games, and has one of the most interesting and mystifying stories. I don't want to spoil that though, so I'll leave that for you to play and find out yourself. The game is set on Shadow Island, a mysterious place with a large mansion and a fort, in which you can play as one of two characters, Edward Carnby from the original Alone in the Dark games, or Aline Cedric. And when it comes to atmosphere, this game pulls it off so well. Even things that are of no threat just seem to make you on edge and nervous. This is the genius of a well-made horror masterpiece. Unfortunately, the Alone in the Dark movie was based loosely on this game, and that movie was, well, not a horror masterpiece. But don't let that spoil the game for you. This is a must-play.
At number 4, Haunting Ground on the PS2.
Where is you?
Everyone talks about Resident Evil as Capcom's amazing horror title, but few people talk about their other, and in my view, even better horror masterpiece, Haunting Ground. also known as Demento in some regions. This game is about Fiona, a girl who ends up in a car accident with her parents, only to wake up in a cage in a Gothic castle being guarded by a big something. A simple but scary homunculus of sorts called Debilitus. Fiona escapes her cage and discovered that this castle is full of people that want to kill her. Debilitus is the least of her problems as she discovers Daniela, the maid, who is absolutely terrifying and brilliant in every single way. No spoilers here, but I might be breaking a rule slightly by even mentioning her. Turns out that Fiona has what is known as Azoth, or a soul, and that is why she is so important to the story. It's really hard to talk about this without spoiling it, but I will say this. You have no way to defend yourself. You can kick, but it doesn't do much. You have to hide from your enemies to survive and hope that they don't spot you. You do get to rescue a lovely little dog from a bear trap in the game, and he will attack pursuers for you, but it won't kill them, only slow them down so you can escape. Dogs rock.
At number 3, we have Hell Knight on the PS1.
Hell Knight is quite possibly one of the most obscure games on this list. It's also known as Dark Messiah in some regions. This game is special because it's doing something that most horror games wouldn't start doing until the modern day indie scene. It's a first-person horror game in which you gain no weapons. You only get one companion with you at a time, and they will give you warnings or advice or alert you to danger. They also take one hit to die, which gives you a chance to escape, but also leaves you with no second chance. Some companions can fight back, but it's not very effective against your pursuer. A zombie. Yep, a single zombie. But make no mistake, if this thing sees you, it can run. Fast. And if that's not bad enough, it changes form as the game goes on until eventually it becomes a full-fledged hell beast that can zip towards you and kill you in a microsecond. This is an example of a game that made me crap myself on so many occasions when I first bought it. It's become quite a collector's item now too. It's really hard to buy a copy for a good price, so prepare to pay a lot of money if you want it. But it's worth it though, trust me.
Coming in at number 2, just slightly falling the mark of number 1 place, we have The Suffering on the PS2.
The Suffering shares something with Cold Fear. It was overshadowed by Resident Evil 4 upon its release. This is a real shame because this game was an absolute masterpiece. I played the demo and loved it so much that the next day I went out and bought it. My granddad gave me the money, I remember, to shut me up about it. This game's hero is maybe not such a hero. His name is Talk, and he is a convict on death row for the murder of his wife and 2 children. Whether or not he actually did those murders, well, that depends on you and your actions, as Talk claims he blacked the whole event out and doesn't remember it. After being taken to his cell, the lights in the prison start to flicker and creatures begin to pick off the prisoners and the corrections officers one by one. This allows you to escape your cell and discover that hell has infested the entire prison and the island it's situated on. Each demon represents a different method of execution and are manifestations of that method of dying. It's never made entirely clear why this is happening as soon as you arrive, but maybe it's because one possible outcome of the story is that you yourself are possessed by a demon, and that's why you had those blackouts. Makes sense, considering you literally turn into a monster when your rage meter is full. This game has a similar atmosphere to my number one pick.
Coming in at number one, the game that I found the most terrifying, the game that gave me the most nightmares in my late childhood and early teen years, and along with the Evil Dead movies, inspired me to study demonology in real life. We have Nightmare Creatures 2 on the PS1.
Nightmare Creatures 2. What can I even say about this game? When it came out, it got the worst reviews I ever saw in my entire life. It was recalled several times, and the release date was delayed so much I almost believed it would never get a release. And finally, everyone said it looked and felt horrible to play, and that it was a rip-off of Resident Evil meets Tomb Raider. So, naturally, I knew it would be good, because most people were just saying that because they thought Resident Evil was God and all else should perish. They were wrong. Nightmare Creatures 2 was by far the greatest thing I had ever played. Its atmosphere was dark, eerie, haunting and terrifying all at once. It used a sort of Silent Hill 1 look to its textures and environments, and it had creatures that were straight out of your nightmares. You play as an escaped mental patient named Herbert Wallace, who was once a member of a secret society of demonologists known as the Circle. This organisation was obliterated by Crowley, the evil black magician and scientist, who had created an army of demons using scientific DNA manipulation and out-of-date surgery techniques. And Wallace was one of the unfortunates that Crowley captured to experiment on. The story of this game continues from the first, and I would have included the first game on here also, but this one just gave me so many nightmares that it just had to be the one I included. Even today, when I put this game on, I feel that atmosphere. I can't explain it. It's a cold, empty, melancholic nightmare that is probably something only I can feel. This game does not leave you defenseless. You have an axe at all times, and you can find bullets and spells to fight your foes with. But I would still classify this as a survival horror, because those extra bullets and items are rare and limited. This game is set in London first and then in Paris, and when you get to climb the Eiffel Tower at the end, and there is a fucking big docker climbing up the outside of it that eventually breaks through to where you are, that shit is scary. This game is very hard to get for a good price now. On the Dreamcast it's a lot cheaper, but PS1 will cost you almost £40 just for the disc alone. But it is very, very worth the money, and I think you should all go out and get it now.
Right, now just before I end this video, here are a few honourable mentions that I didn't put into my top 12. But I do feel that these ones deserve to be mentioned here.
Choosing Global Line for your flight.
And that's it. Thank you for watching the Video Game Cemetery. I hope you tune in next time for more of my content. Please leave a like or subscribe if you enjoyed my video, and please leave a death threat if you didn't. With that being said, I am out.